Good afternoon. We are pleased to have you join us today for our virtual town hall hosted by Digital Promises League of Innovative Schools. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light the extreme inequities that have existed. Today, our town hall will focus on how to center equity in reopening plans to best support students and their families. District leaders from the Digital Promise League of Innovative Schools will discuss their district's approach to restarting schools for the upcoming year and offer guidance on how to address common challenges. I am your host, Dwayne McClary, Director of the League of Innovative Schools. Before we begin, I want to share the outline and a few housekeeping rules. First, all attendees will be muted without talking capabilities. Please input all of your questions for the panelists in the Q&A option on the taskbar of your Zoom window. If you see or hear anything that you agree with, we do ask you to feel free to show your support in the comments option on the Zoom window. So for the outline, for the first 35 to 40 minutes, I will moderate a discussion with our panelists. And for the last 25 minutes, we will shift to the town hall Q&A, where we invite you, our audience, to drop your questions in the Q&A option below. So before we begin, I would like to ask everyone who's on with us just to go over to the Q&A and drop your location where you're from, your city and state. Now let's get to our panelists. Let's welcome our League of Innovative School panelists, Mr. Melvin Brown, Superintendent of Reynoldsburg City Schools in Ohio, Mr. Dan Gohl, Chief Academic Officer of Broward County Public Schools in Florida, and last but not least, Mr. Andrew Smith, Assistant Superintendent of Rowan-Salisbury School System in North Carolina. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Dwayne, so much.
Thank you.
So let's dive in. So we're going to begin with want you guys to do a quick description of your district's geography, your makeup, and student population. And we'll begin with you, Melvin.
Okay, sounds good. I'm in Reynoldsburg, Ohio. We're right outside of Columbus, Ohio, about 15 minutes outside of Columbus proper. So many influences from an urban setting also influence our quote unquote suburban district. We're about 8,000 students, and a large population of my students are students of color, about 64%. So this COVID epidemic obviously has a huge impact on my community and has had a role in how we make decisions. We have 11 schools, and we have a unique high school that's broken up into 4 interest-based academies that give a direct pipeline right into college. Incredible community with a lot of support and a lot of, they've been very patient in this process, and just happy to share some of the stuff that we're actually working on right now.
Great, thank you. Dan?
So thank you so much. Dan Gohl, Broward County Public Schools. Broward's just north of Miami, just south of West Palm Beach. So we're that county in between. The 3 of us together make up what's called South Florida. And we are a fairly large district. We have about 270,000 students, about 50,000 of which are in 90 charter schools. So within our traditional school system, we've got about 220,000 students, 2/3 of which qualify for free and reduced lunch. Now, Florida has a somewhat different ethnic breakdown. It treats Hispanic as a separate category from ethnicity. So we have about half our students who qualify as white, about 40% who qualify as Black, and then we have a mix of Asian, multiracial, and others. But within that, we also have about 36% of our students who qualify as meeting the Hispanic designation. So it's a complex, multiracial, high poverty community that would generally be qualified on a national scale as urban. Though we have 31 municipalities within our single county district. And we are opening a week from today. We'll get into that more of how we're doing it, but our teachers came back for our first day today. We've been involved in a very complex and complicated relationship, as we all have, looking to move forward, but centering equity of both opportunity and achievement, the input and the output measures. And how that's playing out in South Florida is probably similar to how it's playing out in your world. And I look forward to our conversation around that today. So thank you to the League for bringing us together.
Andrew.
North Carolina, just north of Charlotte, North Carolina. Rowan-Salisbury Schools serves a mix of students. We have an urban space, a suburban area, and also a rural area. We're known for having some of the fastest internet in the world inside of our city, and an area with a complete desert of internet, only 10 miles away. And so we understand these gaps in resources for students. We serve about 19,000 students in our 35 schools, with about 65% of our students being free and reduced lunch. So we are going back under what our state calls Plan B, which is a in-person model. So I look forward to talking a little bit more about that a little bit later.
Wow. So I think none of you have started school yet. I think Melvin, you start on the 24th. Dan, you start on the 19th. And Andrew, you start very soon on the 17th for your students. Wow. So first question, let's just dive in. When your district reopens, what will school look like and what models are you planning to use? And so we'll begin with you, Melvin.
Sure. So we are starting completely remote. If you asked me that question 3 weeks ago, we were in a hybrid mode where we were going to bring back 50% of our kids over the span of 2 days, and then the other 50% on the other 2 days, and then having a day to clean. That is what we are calling our hybrid plan. If we're able to shift to that, we are going to start 100% remote. We're working really diligently to make sure all of our kids have internet connectivity 100% throughout the district. I think by the time we reach Wednesday of next week, we will have accomplished that. So I'm very excited about that. Chromebook distribution is going on as we speak. So kids will have devices in their hands, and really excited about what this is going to look like. We know we've had some time to prepare. We know it's got to look very different than it did in the spring when we closed, when we were kind of in reaction mode. Our teachers and our staff have worked really, really hard to put in place a digital platform, interactive tool that actually meets the needs that are out there. We're also looking to use our buildings potentially and in cooperation with the health department. We still may be bringing in small groups of students to provide various types of services that they need, to include special education, EL services, and what have you. So our plan's coming together, and we're hoping at some point we'll be able to shift into a hybrid mode where we actually bring kids into the buildings, but that will remain to be seen for the next few weeks.
Andrew, share how you're planning to reopen and what that looks like.
All right, it's okay if I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm gonna share with you guys just a few little images here on some of the work that we're doing. Can I just get a thumbs up if you can see that, Dwayne? Oh, perfect. So I mentioned our demographics. We looked at a lot of different strategy for how we would start to reopen. I know most folks are pretty close, so not many people are left in the strategy development area. But if you haven't moved into a space where kids are coming back in person, you still got some time to think about what that might look like. And I think there are some great sectors that are doing this already. I mentioned before that if Disney World can bring people back onto their campus, you can too, probably with less of a budget, but you can take from some of their ideas. And I hope that you can learn from some of us who are going first back into that space, some of those do's and don'ts as we move into it. So we are entering what our state calls Plan B, which is what Melvin described he was about to go into, is a hybrid model, an A-day, B-day model. You can see it at the bottom there. We have in-person days for 2 different cohorts of kids, with a virtual Wednesday for all staff and students. It's our cleaning day. And so everyone is remote except for those folks in our facilities. We also needed to offer a virtual option. We had lots of parents who were very concerned about their kids going back face-to-face. And so we opened up a brand new virtual school. We stood that up in about 4 weeks, which was no small task. We opened up enrollment and ended up with about 4,500 kids choosing that option. For reference, again, we have about 18,000 students. So a good chunk of our kids are choosing that virtual school option. And it is a year-long commitment. And so it's yet to be seen how that interplay is going to move back and forth between if we were to get a vaccine and people wanting to move back into that space. But we designed our virtual school to be one that we hope moves on forever. It's not a temporary solution. We really feel like COVID's going to change the way people feel about in-person versus remote learning, and that we need to have that option and choice for our families, because if we don't, someone else likely will give it to them. So just to kind of mention how we're thinking through some of our guidance, you can always go to our website to see some of this. We know that because we are doing 3 days remote, it can't be the same way we did it in the spring. We've got to have a new focus on how we approach learning from home. And so we developed lots of guides for our kids to understand what it's like to be at home. This is still a pandemic, but this is less of kind of emergency pandemic learning like we had in the spring. And so we developed lots of resources for those folks. To the bigger things that most people are worried about, we try and keep instructional always our focus, but most people are worried about safety. And so I think, as most folks are probably doing, we developed a guide. Just to kind of mention our process, we developed the most comprehensive version for our school board and our administrators. It was about 60 pages long. We then took that and we began paring it down into smaller and more targeted information. So teachers get a more watered down, per se, more targeted version. And from that, we make it a parent one as well and a community one, so that our communication is aligned. That's something, if there's anything I can mention to folks to make sure you're doing, you can't let communication paths get crossed. It breeds frustration. People don't know where the right answers are. And in today's world, it's hard to find a good, solid answer. And so we're trying to provide that by creating those kind of aligned documents. We make everyone from a bus driver to a school board member know exactly the same information if they're reading it. We also know that these guidelines are actually pretty terrifying for kids, for some of them. And so we tried to make more kid-friendly versions of this. So we have an excellent art department. And here you can see on the left, this is actually a TikTok. So we created our district's first TikTok channel because of this. Hopefully somebody buys TikTok in the next 44 days, or all of our safety videos are going to go away, if you've been following the news. And so these are fun, kind of fun-loving videos, but they get at the safety rules around how to interact during a pandemic and COVID in school. So just want to share some of those resources. They are all on our website if you just Google Rowan-Salisbury Schools.
Thank you, Andrew. I hope someone buys TikTok too, because my 13-year-old daughter is about to go crazy. All right, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
It's amazing to think that the fallout from our pandemic experience could in fact be the loss of social media, and our kids are crying more about that than about the loss of their instructional day. And with all humor aside, it is our concern about instruction that's driving all of our concerns across the league. And it's hard to be innovative when the innovation is forced by conditions. But we're also wise enough to know you can never pass up a crisis. And so we're doing the best we can. Similar to what Melvin said, we were planning on having some form of hybrid. We will not. Here in South Florida, our overall community spread rate's about 10%. For our minors, those under 18, it's about 17%. That's actually down. We do not believe that we can begin bringing students back in large numbers until after the 2-week rolling average of positivity rates is below 5%. We are not there. So beginning after we will open on August 19th virtually. I'll take you through that in a minute, share my screen. But beginning right after Labor Day, we'll begin monitoring. Hopefully by then we'll have had our 2 weeks. Fingers crossed, everybody's got their face mask on, socially distanced. That's not been our summer. And because of that, our schools are having to adjust. We've got to pay attention to the things people are doing because we are moving to e-learning, such as learning pods, which may be compromising community spread. I think that's worthy of notice, but not for necessarily discussion today. So let me share with you that we've got a large number of employees, in excess of 30,000, and most of them are off for the summer. We've still had several hundred positive cases of COVID on our facilities over the summer, even though it's mostly been contracted workers or clerical staff or administrators. This virus is continuing to spread whenever people do not respect social distancing. Therefore, we put the most stringent social distancing in place we can. our 220,000 students will be at home. Our teachers will have the option of teaching from home or teaching from their classrooms by going into the schools. And we are building from a model that we deployed in, and can you see my screen here? All right, thank you. So we have an updated learning model because we had a learning model in the spring. What our learning model in the spring said is that teachers and students would get together for approximately 3 hours of instruction at the teacher's convenience each day. And that meant we had very little structure. We're now returning to structure. All schools will be operating on a common schedule. Elementary schools will start at 8, middle schools at 8:30, high schools at 9. Most of our high schools historically start at 7:30, but we're trying to use that research that says adolescents do better when they start later. The absence of having to do bus transportation is allowing us that flexibility. So that's a huge piece. But by putting all the schools on the same master schedule, we're now able to have it so that teachers can share singleton courses such as advanced placement physics or African American history across schools. And that's been a huge piece. We have to meet our state requirements. Our state has said that we will not be exempted from any mandatory attendance or other requirements. So then we need to make sure that we are documenting student attendance, and teachers will be taking it. The way it works for us, I'll go into in a minute. We do have some flexibility. We were considering an evening option. We offered it to our families, and we had about 2% of our elementary students' parents opt in for an evening session. So now we're not doing that. We had anticipated that it would be much more popular than it proved to be. We were going to run a school day starting at 3 p.m. and then carrying it into the evening. Wasn't what the community wanted. So that community conversation was critical. Instead, we'll be doing for the elementary students what we're doing for the secondary students, which is additional live tutoring through Microsoft Teams. And that's something that we anticipate a lot of demand for and are trying to staff up by using central office, classroom coaches, and other certified personnel who do not have assigned student loads. In planning for our curriculum, we've developed and distributed through our learning management system, which is Canvas, an exemplar curriculum for all courses, all grade levels. Our kids go to school by signing into their single sign-on, which for us is done through Clever. And they land on a launch pad that gives them all their curriculum, their instructional materials. They then go to Canvas to a report to class, which is where teachers find all the special ed accommodations, all the ELL accommodations, response to intervention, and other things are identified on their class roster. And that's something we've built out over the last 3 years. For video interaction, we are now requiring that it take place every day. And for high school and middle school students, that means their whole class period, whether it be 50 minutes every day or 90 minutes on a block schedule, will be done according to the master schedule through Microsoft Teams. For elementary students, obviously 5 hours on a video chat is not feasible. It's not developmentally appropriate. So we'll be dividing that up into times with whole group, small group, individual, and then time off.
Wow.
Digital tools and getting help, and all of this is being pushed out. We have developed parent, teacher, and student guides for this that we've pushed out. I've put 2 links into the chat, one of which is Learning Never Closes, which is a website we had actually developed to respond to hurricane closures and have now repurposed to respond to COVID closure, and as well as our parent universities, which will be starting this week, educating our parents as to how to navigate the new instruction. We've tried to put up some additional supports for teachers, including formative assessments, diagnostic assessments, but most of all, the cadence of our school year is the first few days are on relationships. Then it's about grade level instruction. As Chief Academic Officer, I've made it clear that I do not want to see assessments dominate school days until after we are back from Labor Day. We need 2 to 3 weeks of actually learning and teaching prior to any kind of assessment, because I'm not interested so much about did this year's 4th graders miss something from 3rd grade last year. I'm interested about whether this year's 4th graders can do this year's 4th grade work. And that's a really important message.
Great.
And then we've got additional supports. I'll be pushing this out through the league, including illustrations of what it's like for a student, Malik, to go through their e-learning day. And I'm going to hand it back to Dwayne to push us along.
Wow, Dan, you guys are rocking and rolling. So quick.
We're trying hard. I just know that whatever we do is going to come up short. And so this is really the end of the planning phase. Our teachers are back this week. We need to make sure that they're comfortable with what we've done.
Mhm.
And then next week becomes responding to the reality, because we know that our plan is not the same as what the reality will be.
Wow. So to kind of piggyback on all of this planning, my question is for you guys, what have you learned from the spring when COVID first hit? And how are you making adjustments for the upcoming school year? And we'll start with you, Melvin.
Right. For us, we learned that it was important to have as much interaction via video chat as possible that we could muster. I think we did a decent job of it back in the spring, but we can certainly improve upon that as we go forward in the fall. We're also looking at the individual needs of individual kids and making sure we be able to address those needs as well, be they social, emotional, be they mental, whatever the case may be. I'm excited about the fact that we're going to be able to do some things with our special education students that we were not able to do in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And doing some face-to-face instruction in that regard. It's been fun in many ways as far as planning is concerned, but taxing at the same time. Understanding that not everything we do today is going to actually work tomorrow. Just as Dan said, we know we're going to fall short in some areas, and we beg patience as we move through that process. I'm excited also about the fact that we've made such a concerted effort to make sure all of our kids have internet connectivity. We've advocated for for quite a while now that should be a basic possession that everyone has, and it should be similar to that of an electric bill or a gas bill. Everybody should have internet as well, because to deprive people of information is to basically put in place and mandate inequity, and we can't have that. So I'm excited about that prospect as well. I think we've challenged ourselves to learn to think very differently about education. I think when COVID is done, education should look very different, which means we need to start planning differently now. I've said that if the 2021-22 school year starts the same way the 19-20 school year started, then we've done something wrong, and I may need to go somewhere else because we have to certainly look at progressing and making education more accessible for all kids. The model that we're looking at currently, that we've been in since the late 1800s, essentially, has not worked for all kids. So therefore, it's incumbent upon us to use this crisis as an opportunity to improve.
Yeah, I don't think we want you to go anywhere yet, Melvin. All right, Andrew, tell us what you've learned.
Good thing. So we are one-to-one. We've been one-to-one about 6 years. So the transition wasn't all that difficult for us. We've been doing e-learning days for inclement weather. And so we were it wasn't that big of a lift. I think what we were least ready for was the notion that we were like, everybody's got to be learning constantly. And I think we quickly overlooked how important the relationship piece is, and just checking in on people. And I don't mean just kids, I mean adults too. Like there's something to be said for seeing people. And that's one of the reasons we're really excited about being able to go back in person next Monday, is we're going to lay eyes on kids we haven't seen since last March. And what we've learned through that is we are going to intentionally slow down. We've kind of openly said we don't expect instruction to really be going on in the first 2 weeks. We need to assess where our kids are emotionally, and then also teach them how to live in a pandemic. Like, how do we do school differently in a pandemic? And so intentionally slowing down, making sure we're spending time around relationships with kids, checking in on adults. And the other piece is developing accountability mechanisms for the structures that you're building. To Dan's point, we're going from, like, that's central office plans, and then we just give it to the schools and say, all right, and then if it works, then we've done a good job planning. But that lift is now theirs, and they're feeling that lift in our schools. And so we have to have accountability mechanisms to say, what we developed in early July, is that still applicable? Is it still working in our schools? And have to be a nimble organization to make changes quickly. Because of the evolving nature of our guidance, we need to say, we said every kid has to be X amount of feet apart in the hallways. Are those mechanisms working? We can't let them just go and go and go without checking them. So that's something that we've learned and know we're gonna have to do in the fall.
Yeah. Dan, what you guys learned down in Broward?
So what I'll do is kind of highlight three things, and they've already been touched on by my colleagues. I'll just say how they're here. One, relationships are what occurs, and that's what we've got to nourish, right? So we've got a lot of social emotional learning baked in up front, but we're also building in mindfulness activities to every school every day. And we are being absolutely explicit about having everybody check in on themselves, and then from having checked in on oneself, be able to check in on others.
Yeah.
And that it's that combination of self-care and care for others that it's one coin. And so trying to do that explicitly. Secondly, that interaction really matters. And that for us, I've already mentioned, but I want to reemphasize, having the structure of a scheduled school day is going to be really important and a big change. We emphasized flexibility in the spring. We're now emphasizing structure in the fall. The other part of that is, to Melvin's point about video interaction, we have now explicitly said it has to occur. We were very generous with teachers as to how they interacted with kids, including phone and email and chat box. We now need to have the video interaction. The third one, and I think it's an area where we came up short in the spring and we're really putting a big emphasis on, it's layers and layers and layers of communication. Communication to students about what to expect, to teachers about what to expect, to parents about what to expect. Now that we're done talking about what they should expect, we have to move from having a mouth to ears and leading by our ears and having mechanisms for them to tell us what is it that they don't understand, what is it that's not going well. And so we're not getting that yet, right? That's really not going to happen until everybody comes back to school. But that communication piece, so relationships, interaction, communication.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about, I know we're talking about equity and, you know, how COVID has really put a spotlight on these issues, you know, coming from social justice unrest and now with the pandemic. What will schooling look like for your most vulnerable student groups or students who need individual support that will require closer contact and potential making them more vulnerable for viral transmissions? So what would that look like for your most vulnerable students? And we'll start with you, Andrew.
Sure. When you say vulnerable students, you mean health-wise or students in general who are?
Let me rephrase that, your marginalized students.
Okay, gotcha. For us, this is one of the big reasons we are coming back to school in person. It's probably the most driving reason that we're willing to take a risk and go back in person. It's so that we can see those kids, we can figure out what's going on with them, and for 2 days a week, be able to provide them with in-person resources.
Mm-hmm.
We recognize quickly that there would likely be issues with around nourishment. And so we kind of worked with the state to be able to provide shelf-ready foods for those other 3 days, knowing that most of our kids depend on us for at least 2 meals a day. And so, you know, for us being able to see them in person, we can kind of solve for that. I like that we can do iterations of this every week. So we will learn week to week what our kids need. So they come back after the weekend of having 3 days remote. They're seeing their teachers are saying, listen, my internet is not as good as I thought it was. Can I have one of those hotspots that you guys have offered? And then try and supplement that in. So if there's one big advantage for us, to me, it's that our plan allows for us to be able to see those kids and to understand what they're going through and provide them with the resources that they need.
Great. Dan, what does that look like for down in Broward, for most vulnerable, your most marginalized students?
So our most marginalized students, we have a couple of dimensions we're looking at. I want to start with our special education population, for whom distance learning, we've now rebranded it as e-learning, simply did not do it. These students often have behavioral conditions that prevent them from being able to stay on camera. They may have physical disabilities that make it very hard or impossible for them to interact. Many of these require 24-hour nursing care. You know, there's about 10,000 kids who fall under self-contained classrooms, cluster programs, or other specialized services that we just don't think e-learning can cut it. We wanted to bring them back on April 19th, even if we didn't bring anybody else back. Pandemic conditions don't allow us to do that. We're now looking at potentially as early as August 31st, but they will be brought back before the general population. In the interim, we're trying to set up extended hours so that they may have more, a longer time to interact, so that they have shorter durations of interaction. That requires restaffing. Beyond the special ed population, we're deeply worried about those students who are already years behind when it comes to their grade readiness. And teachers often mask those kids by making adjustments on the fly in classrooms, pulling books off the shelf, modifying assignments. That is very hard to do in a digital space when you've never done it before. It is possible to do, but we know that our teachers are just being comfortable in this new environment that they're learning. So what we're trying to do is to outsource that to more one-on-one help through separate video chat distribution systems in order to alleviate the general ed teacher from doing that. So we may have more pullout than those students would normally have gotten, particularly around achievement issues. And then the third one are those students who have language problems. And what we're trying to do is set up some time for native language instruction in parallel with the English language instruction that's going on. These students are embedded in our English classrooms, but we do think they're going to need some native language specific support. And so those are the three marginalized populations I'll hit on. Those correlate with race and class, right? I've defined them by education designations, but they are disproportionately Black and brown kids. They are disproportionately poor kids. Yeah. And so we're also looking at our CARES Act and Title I funding to redirect to those, in addition to paying for PPE. Those kids need special support.
Great. Melvin.
I can say ditto on all those fronts from both Andrew and Dan. We have to address all those areas. One of the things we are also being very cognizant of is the fact that we've had a number of kids who went home during the spring and reported that they were actually thriving while they were at home. So we have to look at ourselves and say, what does that say about our district, our schools, our offerings, our interactions, our relationships, to making sure those kids are coming back into a space where they feel connected and have a sense of belonging. So in addition to all those inequities that we've identified, that's an area we really need to focus on. We need to find those kids and capture them and figure out what it is once we do some in-person learning. What can we learn from that process that makes us a much more effective educational institution in that regard? So that's one other piece of the marginalization I'm very interested in, and how we're going to address that going forward. As I mentioned earlier with special education, that's something that will get specific, detailed attention to make sure our kids are able to come into a situation that is going to be conducive to their needs. And some may say, well, you know, those kids get to go, but these don't. Well, that's an equity issue. We're giving kids the things that they need to be successful. And that doesn't necessarily mean everybody gets everything or the same thing. So in many senses, it's given us a challenge in this space where we're talking about social justice and equity. This gives us a real good educational reason to have some of these discussions. And in addition to that, we're already talking about racial and social justice within our curriculum and within the cultures of each of our buildings. We've already had some professional development with our principals just this week, and that will continue with our teachers as they come back in, next week. We have a lot of good things ahead of us, and I'm pretty excited to watch those go into place.
Hey, Dwayne, can I just mention something I saw in the Q&A?
Yeah.
Angela had asked about, and I think it talks about for our vulnerable populations. The question is around, what do you do about these video interactions that are at home, and how do kids, how do they interpret what they see behind a student? And it kind of dawned on me, I hadn't thought fully through this, but it reminds me a little bit of like uniforms. So as you can see, Dwayne has this uniform background. And to me, that could be just a requirement of large group chats of kids, that they have maybe it's a school logoed version of it, if it's a district issued device, to where you can, just like in a uniform, you can kind of strip away and make everyone kind of equal in that space. So just a suggestion. I don't know if anybody else, sorry, I just kind of monopolized it, but the question seemed like it lended itself to it.
Yeah.
If I could, I'd give my props, some props to my board member who's on, who asked that question.
All right. All right, Angela.
All right. Melvin is a good guy. You pay me later, Melvin.
In Melvin's contract.
All right, guys. Next question. Everyone is talking about, expecting learning loss, during the next current school year. So we talk about learning loss from the summers, we call summer slide. And now people are talking about the COVID slide. My question is, what strategies are you going to put in place to help support students academically when they come back? And can you offer guidance on how schools can help meet students' non-academic needs, like the social emotional piece, when they come back to school also? Because I think you kind of hit on that, but can we dig a little deeper on that? Dan, we'll start with you.
So thank you. So the first thing I want to do is something we tried to do over the summer, we tried to do in COVID, and we must do in the fall. We've got to have kids reading more. Mm-hmm. I'm terribly afraid that in our screen dominant culture, and even now reinforced by schooling being through screens, kids aren't picking up books as much. And there is behavioral and cognitive benefits to reading, and we need them to do so. So that's for our kids who can read, and we need to really promote and reward kids for reading, and finding ways to do that's going to be a challenge. For our youngest learners, the challenge is how to teach reading through a screen. And we've been spending a lot of time on that. But to me, engaging with text, be it a printed book or a digital book, engaging with text is what they've been out of practice with. When it comes to the content knowledge and the skills, we need to really use the technologies to have kids write. They need to tell us about their experiences, and they need to be given voice and feedback. And I think that if we can hook them by getting regular feedback from trained educators, we'll actually be able to get them much more engaged in the history of, and then pick a time period, or the science of, and pick a topic. Those things will flow if we have them engaged. First they have to attend, then we have to engage them. The achievement will then follow. Yeah. My administrators are all too ready to quantify the learning loss that they fear. And they are ready to deploy these multiple choice testing schema through the websites in order to begin doing measurement. The reality is we cannot trust that data. How many parents, how many kids will either help each other or blow it off? I just don't put a lot of trust in our standardized testing done remotely. So what I think we need to do is more of project-based, participatory, and student text written materials. And then we've got to begin prepping for deep and intensive 2 to 3 years of additional supplemental services being available to students. Whether this ends up being a 6-month, 12-month, or 18-month experience before we have a full, widely distributed vaccine, we've got to be prepared for multiple years of impact.
Wow. Wow. Melvin?
Sure. We've done a number of things in order to prepare, and we've also learned from the spring. We've adjusted most of our curriculum maps to accommodate for some of those gaps, so that some of our kids that are coming in, we know are going to have some slide take place, or we're able to catch them up, or in a sense, catch all of us up. We've looked at what the state has provided in terms of our guidance for our gap analysis tools, and that's going to be part of our teacher and student expectation documents. We're looking at what our state's updated assessments for teachers look like and using those as resources to determine gaps. We'll be doing some things at the very front end, the first couple of weeks of school, to gauge where kids are cognitively and socially with some assessments. Some partnerships we have with assessments in that regard to get a sense of where they are. Tons of additional software and online supports that we didn't think we would have needed in, say, February of 2020. Now we actually need those things. Expanding our tutoring efforts for our students in a different manner, and making those look a little less like study halls, but actually doing some real tutoring for kids. And then relying on formative assessment practices and providing student feedback, having that as much more of an emphasis than perhaps in the past. On the SEL side, we're also looking at being focused on building relationships in the first couple of weeks, as we mentioned, as we have our kids work toward our Portrait of a Graduate competencies. Engaging our teachers in trauma-informed care, PD, and trauma for the brain. That's going to be part of what they're actually doing in their PD sessions. There's PD on mindfulness and de-escalation that we're doing with our teachers, so they can put that in place at classroom level. And we're also doing some training on cultural competencies in a digital environment. What does that look like? And then finally, we're also doing some things to revise our PBIS plans so we can meet the needs of students in this remote setting, because that's going to be a challenge for us as well. There was a question in the chat box in reference to what we're doing with racial and social justice. We're partnering with The Ohio State University and bringing in professors of African American history who are working directly with us. Dr. Hassan Jeffries was with us on Monday, who's renowned throughout the country. And we're just kind of blessed to be able to have someone like that in close proximity, to be able to work with us and hold our hands as we look at our curriculum and how we change our cultures within our buildings. We have a huge, what we're calling an equity symposium coming up on September 2nd, which will be a teacher PD day. We have a number of different national presenters who are going to be part of a virtual conference that we provide to our teachers. Dr. Clint Smith is going to kick that off. We have a number of other people slated on that agenda that I'm very excited about. And so we knew it was important that we had these conversations up front so they didn't get forgotten in the midst of dealing with COVID and online learning. These things are important as well. And so we're going to be attacking those things pretty heavily.
Great. I'll be expecting my invitation for the Clint Smith presentation. Andrew?
Yeah.
Sure thing. This is kind of actually the exciting thing to talk about as we think about going back in person. We've spent a lot of time talking about the logistics, the tactical nature of going back to school in person. The logistics of safety are paramount. But this is the important work that this is the reason we're coming back. So we can't forget that we're not just coming back to babysit kids so that everybody else can work. We're doing it so that they're going to learn as well. So I mentioned we will take a slow approach. We'll start with the SEL framework and work our way through that. We will take a temperature check of sorts on kids to see how they're doing mentally. Once we've done that, we'll begin to look more at a triage mentality, understanding what is the most important and most high priority element that we want our students to know. Reading and writing are paramount to Dan's point. But one of the big benefits of this model is that teachers are getting what they've always asked for, and that is very small class sizes. And so most of our classrooms at 50% capacity or socially distanced at 6 feet have 8 to 10 students in them. And so we're hoping that those 2 days are actually super intensive around those small groups, and that we actually may get more individual attention with kids than we've ever gotten, simply because of the way we set up the day. And so that's our initial plan for kind of moving into the assessment world of how kids are doing.
Great. So you brought up the teachers. So I have a question around teachers. How is your district altering the measures of effectiveness for teachers during this pandemic? So just to clarify what I'm saying, how are you changing the way you are evaluating teachers during the pandemic? And we'll start with you, Andrew.
Well, we don't have test scores from last year, so they can't use that.
Yep.
This is actually a really unique thing. We are trying to understand if we're going to have those this year as well. Obviously, our hope is that we do not. We have what's known as renewal flexibility. The state of North Carolina wrote a special bill for us. We have charter school-like flexibility inside of the district. And so we can completely rebuild the teacher evaluation model. And so that, on top of trying to do COVID, is a challenging extra task. We've been trying to examine it. But one of the things that we're looking at is how do you observe a teacher online?
Yeah.
What systems and structures can you develop? And then does our teacher model even account for any of this stuff? Like, how does it reflect what needs to be done during a pandemic? And so those are kind of initial questions for us. We have not, even though we have the flexibility to change our teacher evaluation, our principal evaluation, that's all the stuff we're thinking about. But until we get kids back in buildings, we've yet to put pen to paper on a lot of that.
Right. Melvin?
Yeah, I don't know how much I can add to that. Andrew pretty much summed up what that is. That's kind of a deal where we're putting the plane together while it's in the air in some regard. I think it does give you some venues to have some really unique conversations about how to engage kids that may then translate back into the classroom when kids come back. From a digital environment, how are you actually interacting? What types of resources are you providing? What types of guidance are you providing? I'm excited about that notion of it. And then the piece that I'm really excited about is the fact that kids now can be in a space where they can get some direct instruction and actually have time to apply that learning in a practical fashion without having to be in a building from, say, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's going to look very different. So I'm excited to see what kinds of possibilities result from that, and what types of things kids will learn to do to supplement their education, their in-person education when they're outside of school buildings. I'm really looking forward to that.
Dan.
So I want to build off Melvin's flip in the classroom and Andrew promoting deeper learning and say that that's what we're trying to do. That, I think, needs to be what this exceptional year, when we have none of the traditional measures, metrics, behaviors, mandates, allows us to field test. If we are really effective at it, people will begin understanding what we have always meant by competency-based education and decoupling time from credit. And when they return to the classroom, they will simply view it as an extension of what they've been doing in the digital space rather than a retreat to the physical classroom. So as per teacher appraisal, we've got a similar instrument. We can do formal observations in the sense that a assistant principal can join a Teams meeting and observe the class and see all the tiles, but that's not the same thing. So it really has to be about how engaged are the kids. We really are trying to get our administrators, when they visit classrooms now, and we're going to spend several weeks having them practices at the beginning of the year, don't watch the teacher, watch the kids. How effective is this teacher at keeping the kids focused on them? How are they doing at engagement? We've got all kinds of metrics about time, submission. That's not important. It's, are you motivating the kids to keep trying at the beginning of the year? Because if they check out early, we will have a very hard time bringing them back. Our teacher effectiveness is about keeping kids engaged.
Got you. So we're going to now shift over to the Q&A from the audience. So I'll remind the audience, you please use the Q&A option on the bottom of your Zoom screen to type your questions. And one question that's coming in is, how are we measuring student engagement? How are you guys going to measure student engagement? I'll start with you, Melvin.
That's a great question. In terms of what we look at from the, as Dan mentioned, we certainly can look at the class and watch how they're responding to things and get a sense of it in that respect. But I think we're also going to have to do some things that allow us to connect directly to kids, for them to kind of tell us how closely they're engaged in the process. This gives us an opportunity for kids to help us to remake the classroom. Finding out ways, if they're not engaged, why aren't you engaged? We can find out some of those answers. We can adjust what our classroom instruction looks like. I wish I had a formal answer for you for how that looks. I'm excited to experiment.
Yeah. Andrew.
Sure. We have been using a product called Panorama as our way of measuring student engagement. And so we give that survey twice a year, and there are kind of various facets that of engagement that it measures. And so then we use that dashboard to kind of understand it. So I'm going to be really fascinated to see those results as we look at this year-over-year data, like how engaged are kids when they're with teachers 2 days a week and 3 days remote. To me, that's really fascinating data on the implications of pandemic learning.
Yeah. Andrew, I mean, not Andrew, Dan, I'm sorry.
No, let Andrew keep going. I'm learning so much. So, we also have used Panorama, and it is a wonderful platform, and they do come with pre-populated and nationally normed data sets so that you can both get internal and comparison data. What I'm going to first monitor is the digital engagement, right? Are kids present? Because we got to track down all the kids that aren't. And we can do that through the single sign-on solutions. But what I need to know by the week after Labor Day is behavioral engagement. How many kids have yet to turn in an assignment? How many kids are apparently zombieing their way through school? They're sitting in front of a screen, they're letting the teacher do the work, and they're not having to. It's like tuning into a bad TV show, right? Just never change the channel. That's not engagement. So I'm going to be fascinated on September 11th when our teachers have to turn in their first progress, what we call interim reports for the first marking period. How are teachers evaluating kids? In order to not have that be a disaster, we are promoting very heavily our learning management system's mobile applications. Canvas has a student app, a teacher app, and a parent app. And by promoting mobile communications through the learning management system, I'm hoping to get horizontal communication, not vertical communication through the administration, but just parent reaching out to kid, the parent being able to look in the gradebook and see if the kid's behind. I think just creating the right conditions and nourishing people's own self-interest will take care of a lot of it. And then we can focus school district resources on those kids who have no advocate. That's what equity is. It's the abnormal distribution of resources to deal with conditions that need it. And so that's what we're thinking.
So let's talk about the students that may be homeless or just the most marginalized student. How are you guys going to approach that? A kid that may be homeless and not able to get online. What are the safety nets for those students? And anyone can just chime in.
So under Title I and Title IV and some others, we have a homeless office. We've got about 6,000 registered as homeless within our federal designation, right? They actually have an advocate. I worry about the ones who are in multi-generational homes who do not have a single caregiver, but actually have many partial caregivers. And so nobody's actually following up on school. And they may be homeless or not homeless. We have designated social workers and family counselors to track them down, but our capacity is nowhere near the demand. We had 1,600 kids who we could not track down in the spring.
Wow.
Now that's less than 1% of our population. So we get to put out press releases saying that we engaged more than 99% of our kids. But that 1,600 is not okay. And trying to ensure that we don't celebrate the 99% until that 1,600 is down to 0 is a tough balance, because otherwise people feel like it's always negative. So we got to motivate staff to keep reaching out. This is a moral and ethical imperative, and feeding people that their urgency is what's required is our first task.
So those 1,600, have you identified like the demographics they're from? And I'm sure you're digging into the data.
Yeah, no, and what we ended up calling previous teachers, trying to find out if we had many of them appear to have left the community, right? So when the school closures happened, they left South Florida and went someplace else. And less than 1%, that's very possible, right? You could have a 1% turnover very easily. But we don't think that's true for all of them. We think many of them lost housing and moved locations and never re-engaged with school. The coming days are going to be needing to identify those kids right away. Because it's one thing to close down under change conditions after 75% of the school year has been finished. We're now starting the school year this way, and engagement is absolutely mandatory.
Dan's so right about the whole notion of making sure we identify those kids as early as possible. In our community, due to our size and our proximity to Columbus, we can probably reach them once they're identified and make means to get them to come to us. Because although schools aren't open, quote unquote, we're not closed. So that population will be treated just like others who we know are marginalized, to make sure they have access to a caring adults who can give them that, who can feed that need that they have. And they're just as included, and they just belong to the process just as much as anyone else. So that avenue, I think we'll be able to cover fairly well, at least in our community.
Yeah. So I have one more question, and it's coming in around the strict structure of the school day. How are you guys looking at supporting students who need an adult there with them for online learning, but however the adult has to go to work? How are you approaching those issues? And anyone can jump in with that answer.
We've been able to solve for 2 days of it. The other 3 days have been a challenge. This is where, as a community, we've got to come together around this. We can't do it by ourselves. Folks have said, hey, you can have our facilities, just staff our facilities. Well, we can barely staff our own buildings on those days because we're teaching those kids. And so we put out a community call to action last week. Our superintendent did, to all of our business leaders and our community leaders, to say, if we're gonna make this happen, we need your help. We cannot do this alone. We need everybody to pitch in to make this happen. But that's more challenging than it seems, because the organizations who usually step up with their volunteers aren't working, they're retired. And retired individuals typically aren't willing to go into large groups where there's a bunch of kids for just fear of the virus. And so to me, that's a big space that we're all trying to solve. Our state's trying to push down some money to help solve for it. But if anybody has a good answer on this, I'll be listening.
I'll just add to this is a community responsibility. So couple of things. One, we considered opening our schools up to allow other people to staff for daycare, but that is just not going to work when it comes to our pandemic conditions right now. So we are working with community organizations who are willing to fund after-school program offers, Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, YWCA, et cetera, to see if they can provide services. The problem is that they, based on my conversation last night with them, think they can do maybe 2,000 kids. That means we're going to have to prioritize it for first responders, right? Police, nurses, doctors, and doesn't let me get at our special ed population or our low achievers, who I would love to put into what are effectively learning pods. We have a number of organizations in the community that are charging $2,000 a month to put your kid into a learning pod at their private organization. That means money is buying parents time away from their kid, and that kid is getting extra support for our learning. That is only exacerbating the inequities of the physical world. We know those things go on with after-school tutoring and Saturday camps and things during the regular year. We're seeing that privilege manifest itself under our current conditions. If we are to try and respond to that inequity with efforts at equity, we need more community resources to bring those opportunities to the disenfranchised. I don't have them yet. When it comes to the kids who need structure, we're trying to do it with our after-school support, our homework genius hours, but we know that it's not enough. I'm coming up short on this. So Melvin, give us an answer.
I'm going to come up short as well. I think you guys have done a great job of putting some ideas out there. It's something we're really going to have to consider as we move through this process, especially depending upon how long we're going to be in it. I think one thing that will come out of this is that the whole notion that school is childcare, that notion has to go out the window, because we actually have a purpose. You know, we're not just taking care of kids when they come to school. We do stuff. So I think understanding from a community aspect, understanding that notion will allow people to realize that it does take everybody to make this happen. Schools aren't able to do it alone. We can all attest to the fact that anytime a new initiative or a new problem comes to the forefront, let the schools take care of it. That plate has continued to pile up and nothing has been removed. So I think it's important, it's crucial that we stress the fact that it has to have community support to get that done. And not only do we have to make sacrifices, our community has to make some as well.
Great. So guys, I think we are at time. First of all, I would like to thank you, Melvin, Dan, and Andrew, for your time for joining us today. I think you guys shared a wealth of knowledge, and I'm sure you can keep it coming, and people are still eager and hungry for this information. But thank you once again for sharing this with not just the league community, but the broader community, with the world. So we hope that this was helpful to someone. And as you guys said, we don't have all the answers, but if we work together, we can definitely find some type of solution. So thank you guys once again for your support. And I'm going to let you guys, if you have any last words, like before we turn it over to my colleague, Misty, please share. I'll start with you, Dan.
So Dwayne, I want to thank you and the league. Little did you realize when Digital Promise set up the League of Innovative Schools that innovation would be what becomes the new baseline. We all experienced a forced migration. We are all immigrants to this new hybrid digital virtual space. Some people have adapted and acculturated right away. Other people are little more than emotional refugees. It is only by being together and sharing the experience and thinking together that we're going to be better. You've given us a platform to share our experiences. All of us need to find communities to do this with on a regular basis. So thank you.
Thank you. Andrew?
Sure, I'll echo that same sentiment. No one is doing this alone. We are all doing this together. There are other folks who are ahead of you in spaces. There are people who are behind you in spaces, and there are people that are at the same space. So although we talked about areas of strengths for each of us, there are spaces that we didn't mention that we're not doing great in. So I think everybody's along this journey in a different path, and always willing to support anyone who has a question.
Melvin, you wrap it up for us.
2 points I'd want to leave with. The first being, be sure to exercise grace and patience as we move through this, because no one has the silver bullet or the magic answer to everything that we're trying to that we're encountering now. So it's easy to say, well, I think it should be a certain way, this should happen, but understanding there are other pieces of the puzzle that impact that one piece. So patience and grace are essential. I'd also like to just challenge us to break apart the traditional educational model, challenge the status quo and do something different so that more kids can be successful and we don't continue to have the learning and achievement gaps that exist. Those gaps exist for reasons, and perhaps some of those reasons are our fault. So what do we do to alleviate those things? So I would challenge everyone to do that and to take care of yourselves as well, because this is going to be some hard work, and it's been trying already.
Great. Thank you guys so much once again for all of your expertise. Now we're going to turn it over to my colleague, Misty Belling. Misty's going to share an opportunity with you guys. Misty, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Dwayne. My name is Missy, and I'm excited to speak with you briefly about the Digital Promise Education Leadership Institute, which is a new initiative that we're launching this fall and that we'd love your districts to participate in. The Institute is designed to support district and school leaders meet the educational and equity challenges exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, many of which were discussed in this fantastic town hall, including supporting families and teachers in implementing remote and blended learning, ensuring equity access and whole child supports, especially for the most marginalized students, and planning for the future of learning. And the goal is really to create a space for district teams to collaborate in a series of interactive online workshops, and in doing so, to gain a network of thought partners, problem-solving strategies, and practical resources. Funding for the Institute has been provided through a generous philanthropic gift, so we are very excited to be able to offer this opportunity at no cost to districts. I'll quickly review some logistics and next steps and then pass the mic back to Dwayne. The Institute will begin the week of September 14th and last through April of 2021. We anticipate that it will entail a commitment of approximately 3 to 5 hours per month, and we would love for your districts to participate. We're going to be limiting participation to a select number of teams, so if you're interested in signing up, please email me at mbellin@digitalpromise.org, and I will drop my email address in the chat. Or please feel free to drop your name and email address in the chat, and I would be happy to follow up with you and provide more information. Thank you so much again for the opportunity to discuss this project.
Great. Thank you, Missy. All right, guys, that concludes the League of Innovative Schools Town Hall. More to come, more town halls are to come. I will just say thank you to Melvin, to Dan, and to Andrew for their expertise that they shared today. So as you can see, equity must be at the forefront of everything that we do, especially for our most marginalized and Black and Brown students. As a Black and Brown student, I will tell you that if it was not for the school system, I would not be who I am and where I am today. So as you guys go through this pandemic, we, the Digital Promise and the League of Innovative Schools, are here to support you and try to help matchmake you with anyone that we can. So with that being said, continue to do right by students in all that you do. Put aside anything that you can think about if, this is going to be easy for me, or trying to make this, if it's unpleasant for me, think about the students. Continue to do right by students. Thank you, and we wish Godspeed to all of you.